For those of you that don't know, your accountant is also capable of gaslighting you.
Wow. Welcome to Recover Her, the podcast where your healing journey begins. I'm Heather Novak, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Tracey Oppenheim, a compassionate psychiatrist. Today, we embark on a path of recovery and self-discovery. We are dedicated to inspiring each and every one of you to overcome your struggles and live your best, most fulfilling life. Your recovery starts now, and we're here with you every step of the way.
It's only up from here, 'cause there's no one else that's me. I'm unbreakable.
Welcome back to Recover Her podcast. Today, it's just Tracey and I.
So I had this idea for today's episode, and it might seem a little odd, but I think it's going to be really useful. A few weeks ago, I had the oddest interaction with a former accountant of mine.
Okay.
And
I know where you're going with this.
Uh-huh. And he sent me a really scathing email. And initially, which I'll read for you, but initially I just slid into like I had done something wrong, and I felt a lot of shame. And you really helped me look at things objectively. And so I thought we could touch on money, avoidance, and how, I've worked really diligently over the last couple of years to let go of that avoidance. And so it was ironic that it came, this email spanking came at a time where I have been very invested and attentive to my finances. So for those of you that don't know, your accountant is also capable of gaslighting you.
Wow.
For a long time, I was disinterested in finances because I felt like that was associated with power, and I've seen so much abuse in that world. So I think I've always wanted to kind of, stay away from it, or just ignore that part of my life, thinking things would handle them if I was doing like the bare bone things of taking care of things.
Sure. Everything's the bills are getting paid.
Putting money in a 401k.
Paid for. Right.
I don't want to think about it.
Got it.
So with that attitude, there came a lot of avoidance. So when, for example, when tax time came, I would be disorganized and not have, all the paperwork or all the data I needed. And I would delay things, getting it to the accountant. I would file extensions, things like that.
Okay.
And through figuring out where that avoidance came from, and now I'm way on the opposite side, where I'm like excited to talk about money. It doesn't feel scary. I think it can be really empowering. I'm having conversations with all my friends, and so many women are avoidant when it comes to money.
Right. Or have financial insecurities.
Absolutely.
And just keeping that topic is sort of can be taboo so often within relationship. I remember growing up, and there was women used to go to a grocery store and write a check to Hornbacher's, which was the grocery store, for $200. And they'd get cash back so that they could go shopping.
Without their husband having
knowing.
to know.
So money is a topic that I think definitely still today people just avoid. And we started this podcast for lots of different reasons, but we want to talk about all of the things, all of it, especially if it's considered taboo or people just don't talk about that kind of stuff. So let's talk about religion, sex, politics, money. But yeah, I've always filed taxes individually. I think I've filed joint tax returns twice before. So I had a lot of that same mentality that you were just talking about, of kind of, reluctant to, God, we used to have to save, well, I tried to at least for business expenses, save receipts and just like it was a nuisance to have to sit down and file my taxes, which I've always done and paid my state and federal, but it's not a sexy topic by any means, but I definitely think that there's energy around it that I'm excited that my life has changed so much where, like you, I'm excited to talk about building wealth and earning and learning from other really successful people.
And taking a look at it, and our friend Juliet has
we'll have to have her on.
Such a good head on her shoulders and has such a good outlook when it comes to talking about money and learning. And so she really
takes the charge out of it.
Yeah, and she really inspired me to take a look at it. And now I'm just so excited by it. So it's funny how quickly it could change. But when I reflect back on it, growing up, when my parents got divorced, my mom was a teacher. She eventually went back to law school, graduated from that when maybe I was 6 or 7 years old. Okay. And for a long time, really couldn't support herself, moved back in with my grandparents. And it wasn't until much later in my life when she really started doing well for herself financially. And so I remember her, I just remember that stood out. And then on the flip side, my father, they were divorced, loved to talk about money and always wanted to talk to me about money. And that felt like such a betrayal in a way, because I remember my mom struggling, but yet he wanted to show me his investments or how much money was in his bank account because he was proud of that.
Right.
Because
maybe that was a way he was trying to, reach and connect to you.
100%. But
it wasn't a power play necessarily, but it was a reach.
But as a kid, it just
uninterested.
And uninterested, and also felt very protective of my mom because I felt like she didn't have wealth because she was taking care of me in different ways anyways. So fast forward, I also really have like a servant's heart where I put relationships with people above anything else, and going into psychiatry, taking care of people. And somehow I conflated this idea that if you were interested in having abundance or earning, that there was, number one, privilege with that, which there is, and then there's power with that. And I was really not wanting to step into my power, because for me, power was always associated with having power over
someone
versus being able to use that power to empower other people. So
when you have that mindset shift, the mindset shifting, that prosperity of every kind is drawn to me now. Abundance, money, wealth, all of that, the energy vibration of it all changes, where it is something now that can be discussed, and it's exciting and it's interesting, and you want to earn and invest and build your own wealth, but you also want to help those around you and your community. Like, everybody benefits from it all.
Absolutely. But I just remember even as a young kid, just being aware of the disparity that existed in the world, and it just didn't add up. It just simply didn't seem right. And so then, the economic disparity and the opportunities and the disadvantages. And so then, as I was fortunate enough to get a professional degree and become a physician, parts of that almost felt dirty to me. Yeah. And so I had a lot of unlearning to do. But anyways, the short version of it is, and it was also interesting because while I was married, my partner was insistent on taking care of
the finances.
And there was kind of this idea that, I couldn't do it or shouldn't do it. So after I got divorced, there was also this idea of like, do I have the ability to really step into this ownership? And so it was like another thing I avoided. So
not anymore.
Not anymore,
Not
baby.
anymore.
So ironic.
When did that shift happen? I mean, has it been 10 years?
No. Oh, gosh. I would say that it shifted in terms of like being excited and lit up and talking about ETFs and kind of staying on top of my game.
Knowing you're not only, I mean, we talk about this a lot, but knowing your worth and your value. I mean, it's a marathon of a game that we play with ourselves of creating this lack, or I'm not good enough, or
receiving, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did it shift?
I mean, I would say over the last decade, it's like slowly, changing with a lot of intention.
And when you say intention, it's bringing because all of this stuff always happens and it's happening in our unconscious. You're just not paying any attention to it. I've done that. I just didn't have to pay any attention to it. And now I want to pay attention to it. So it's bringing it from the unconscious mind into the conscious mind.
And I think that looking at the things you avoid, there's so much value in that because you learn so much about yourself, and then you have the opportunity to make changes. So it's been really fun.
That stand in your way from becoming the best and highest version of yourself, and that's one of them. Money can be that. It can just be. You can be stuck.
Oh yeah.
In that old story or the bizarre mentality of what it's supposed to mean for women to have financial power and financial worth and independence.
Mm-hmm. I had actually made a shift in that I wanted to have a more active role and a little bit of a different team around me. So I had been working with this new accountant, and I had been doing that for about probably like 3 months, 3-4 months or so. And I happened to get an email from the old accountant, I'm not naming any names, who said, I no longer want to work with you. And I didn't think anything of it at the time because I was like, that's awesome because
I'm replacing you anyway.
I don't want to work with you because, it was really hard to kind of learn or communicate. Yeah. And I take responsibility for parts of it because the first few years I really didn't want to have anything to do with it either. So anyways, I didn't think anything of that email. And then when tax season rolled around, my new accountant, who was kind of getting ready to file, has said, hey, like, by the way, did you know that you never paid your 2023 taxes? And I was like, that's impossible. Like or 2022, I think it was.
Okay.
I was like, that's impossible. There's no way. He's like, well, that's what it says on your tax record. And I went back and I looked on the IRS website, and sure as shit, like there was no, my taxes weren't filed.
Panic.
Total panic. And so I started reaching out to the old accountant and wasn't getting any answers. And then.
How long had you worked with that accountant? The old accountant?
Maybe 7 years.
Okay.
And I eventually, when I did get a response, was, you're wrong. They were filed. And then I was like, no.
Showed the evidence showing otherwise.
Right. And then it came back with the response was, well, you never did what you were supposed to do. And my email is like I probably have 20,000 emails in there. So one of the good things about never deleting emails is like you can go back.
Keep receipts.
Yeah. And so I was able to find, this email exchange where I had paid him to file the taxes. He had told me that they were filed. And
you signed off.
I signed off. I had all the things.
It's done.
Yeah. And so it was never done.
So that person just never filed your taxes. He was paid to do so, and it didn't happen.
Yep. And so my assumption at that point was I was relieved. I was like, oh, thank God. Like I found all the documents saying
thank God I didn't do anything wrong.
Yes.
Right. You followed through, did the right thing.
And unfortunately, because there was a delay, and I was assigned like a penalty, right, for not paying the taxes when they were.
Because he didn't send them in.
Right. And
got it.
And so I asked for assistance with that. And anyways, the rest of it gets a little convoluted. But when I was trying to advocate for him to pay for those penalties, I got this email, Heather, and I
was on the phone with you.
I I think I stopped breathing. I've never been spoken to like that before.
Yeah, I was on the phone with you and I couldn't tell. I knew I think you were at home, so you weren't driving. I knew you were safe, but the tenor of the call changed pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I just remember I feel like I stopped breathing, and then I had this like really uncomfortable rising sensation in my body. And then if you had asked me in that moment, how old do you feel right now?
That's a good question.
I think I must have felt, I don't know, maybe like 7 years old. I felt like this little girl that was getting
Being
shamed.
chastised.
Yeah, just spanked. And you asked me at the time to read it, and
Yeah, you couldn't.
And the reason I couldn't was because I was embarrassed, because it felt like I had
done something wrong.
And
you had not done anything wrong.
So let me
read the email.
Let me read this.
The email.
As requested earlier, please provide a letter you received from the IRS so I can contact them at the correct address. I will request an abatement for the 2022 penalty, but it's unlikely to work because you don't have a good history of filing and paying your taxes on time. There is some truth in that. That will definitely work against you. The idea that I could recommend an extension payment without input from you is laughable. Your income varies from year to year. You don't always pay your scheduled estimated taxes, and you don't respond to requests for information. That is why I decided not to work with you any longer. Here's my favorite part, guys. Can you imagine? As to professional care and standards, I have nearly 40 years of experience behind me and paid only one penalty in the 90s. What do you have? You don't even know who's taking your kid as a dependent. I suggest we leave it there. Thanks.
Yeah. Those are fighting words.
Yeah.
Oh.
So how did you
Were you able to access your anger? Well, you said you felt shame.
Oh.
So there's a lot of shit in that email that's simply not true. You've always paid your taxes. So it's a pain in the ass for the women out there that don't file their own taxes to save all of this paperwork that you have when you're independent, when you are an independent contractor or you work for a company. It's a lot of work. So you've always done that. So the email in and of itself is just filled with bullshit lies.
But I think, and this is what's really interesting about gaslighting too, I was going to see if I had the response that I wrote, but I don't, is that oftentimes with gaslighting, there are little truths to what's being said or how you're being manipulated. So there's usually some touching on some vulnerabilities. Right. So for me, he's right. There were times that I ignored communications from him over the years. There were times I filed tax extensions, right? And so it brought up this idea of, oh yeah, like you don't know what you're doing or you're incompetent. And then when he mentioned my daughter, because there's so much, I have so much love for Jordan and value being a mom it's really important. And like, you're
an incredible role model to her. You know that.
So that was like this shaming around being a bad mother.
That's just a big fuck you. Were you able to access your anger?
Eventually, but it probably took me a good 2 days to not be like
have shame around it,
contracted and kind of shut down.
But made you feel small.
Yeah, very effective. But
that little man.
But it was interesting because it was like, what do you have? It's like, well, wait a second. I have like over a 20-year psychiatric career, where I've cared for people, where I've, saved lives, where I've made lives better. I have, it was just like calling.
It made you dip into your own pool of worthiness.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
Because he wrote something like, my 40 years of experience. I can just envision who this fucker is. But that's crazy. It's crazy.
But you helped me so much in, I think, what shifted it for me and how I was able to kind of see through that.
All over
and see
his mistake.
That's what you said. You're like, why are you having this conversation in the first place?
What? None of the feelings, the cans of those old worms should have never been opened because it was his fault.
100%.
And I make mistakes. You should be able to own your mistakes when you have them, not throw darts at whoever, another person for maybe their shortcomings or their vulnerabilities. I mean, crazy making. I wonder how he lives his life.
But I think it was actually a really good learning experience for me because the issue at hand was simply that the taxes didn't get filed.
Right.
He was paid to do so.
Right. It would have been really nice had he just said, I made a mistake. I was wrong. I'll take care of it right now. And if there's any penalty, of course I will be covering that.
And absolutely. And I think, though, this is why work around shame is so important, like in terms of us healing our shame, and we all navigate shame differently. Because when you don't work with it, when you don't understand it, when you're trying to still like hide, whether they're your limitations or your vulnerabilities, it doesn't allow you to be empowered. It will make you want to avoid that hard conversation because it feels like, oh, yeah, sorry, you're right. And no, dude, like.
No. Yeah. I don't want to sit at any table or live inside of a space where I have to hide any of my purchases, where you go to the grocery store back in the day. Hornbachers and write that check so you can go shopping. It's just, so when there are little teaching moments like that, they're just more recognition of where that shame lies around the money topic so that there's more, because when you address it, just like all things life, right, it opens up the floodgates of more goodness on the other side, more awareness. I bet you have a great filing system today for your upcoming taxes.
I do. Yes, it's been amazing.
Yeah. And
I will say, I'll give a shout out to EECPA. Thank you, Mike. You're amazing.
Good. I'm looking for someone new too. Cause I mean, my CPA he doesn't return my calls. This is important stuff I need to know, but I'm figuring it out.
So I have gratitude for the experience now because I saw where I still too quickly go to it's my fault.
Yeah, what did I do wrong?
Right. So that was good to see. And also, I'm so grateful that I have the ability to admit when I'm actually wrong and to apologize and to do that with grace. And I'm grateful that you certainly model that so well too, because I think going through life where you can't take accountability, I wouldn't want that for myself. Thank you for seeing me through that moment and empowering me and helping me get fired up about that.
Prosperity of every kind is drawn to me now. I'm going to leave that with our listeners.